So close to me. All right, well, we're going to be in John chapter 11 today.
Is it 11?
11, yes.
Lazarus, yes.
Mm-hmm. Yep, the big one. Oh.
You know, like Pastor Jordan says, poor Lazarus, he had to die twice.
Right.
C.S. Lewis has a poem to that effect. Calls Lazarus. I think it's called like the first martyr or something like that. And I'm trying to remember, but there's a line that's something like, you who had just set foot on that blessed shore had to come again to stormy harbors, or something like that. And yeah, I mean, this isn't really pertinent to the miracle itself, but it's kind of worth. And we're given no information, right?
Yeah.
What was Lazarus's life like after his resurrection?
Or how long did he live?
Right. Well, and that's a huge question. Personally, I don't think he lasted very long, because I mean, we're not going to get to it in the text, but what does happen at the end is when Jesus raises Lazarus from the dead, this is the final straw for the Pharisees.
Yeah.
We're done. We cannot do this anymore. He's got to die. We have to kill Jesus. And the follow-up to that, which we don't notice as often because the pericope ends before we hit that, but when they are making Jesus the target, they put one on Lazarus's back too.
Yeah.
I think it's extremely likely that Lazarus died on Holy Thursday or Good Friday. When they make their move on Jesus, they make it on, I mean, if you're any kind of a mobster, you don't do it halfway, right? When you're going after people, you go after all of your targets, right? So, I mean, I don't know.
They were pretty ruthless back then, too.
Well, especially for this, right? Now, to be fair, if that happened, then Pastor Jordan's sermon, Lazarus Laughs, for his Easter sermon is just totally inaccurate. But I mean, who knows, right? Maybe Lazarus was someone they didn't go after, or maybe they couldn't find him, right? And there is some indication, we'll hit that in the study today, there's some indication that certainly Mary and Martha, presumably Lazarus as well, know that association with Jesus is not safe. And we'll kind of touch on it does not explicitly say it, but there's one detail that gets kind of put in there that, and one of the likely answers is they know that there are people out to get Jesus. And if that's the case, they might have they can't go too far out of town because they make it to the tomb, but they could have been in hiding. Who knows, right? But yeah, the other one that gets brought up a lot in, angels on the head of a needle sort of conversations is, what did Lazarus experience in the 4 days that he was in the tomb? I mean, C.S. Lewis in the poem, at least, seems to go with what I think most people's assumption is, that Lazarus goes to heaven or to, whatever that is. You've heard my intermittent statement, the whole thing, right? But we're never told that. The closest we get, which is not close, is in a parable that Jesus tells, right? The rich man and Lazarus. Yeah. So there's another question. Is this the same guy? I think it very unlikely. Because what do we know about the Lazarus from the parable?
Well, he was alone.
He was alone, he was destitute, and, and his death happens well before his resurrection, right? So it's unlikely that it's the same person. It's just the same name. And yes, Lazarus isn't a super common name today, but I don't think it was terribly uncommon to the point where it would be shocking. Oh my goodness, just two of these guys? What are the odds? Obviously, I don't have statistics on that. I know Jesus and Mary were extremely common names at this time. But yeah, so, I mean, what did Lazarus experience? For my guess, and it's a shot in the dark, right? I have no way of knowing that, no information. My assumption is that it felt like a dream or a sleep. My guess is he died and then he woke up. And that is merely based on a little bit of a hope in God's mercy of, oh man, really, you're going to do that? But also, Jesus' references to death as sleep. My guess is that that's analogous to what Lazarus experienced. Of course, even that's not super well formed out because sleep is used many times throughout the Bible as a description of the experience of death. So what happened to Lazarus? Well, you'll have the opportunity to ask him, so he'll describe the whole thing to you, I'm sure. He's probably gotten to the point where it's like an awards ceremony. It's like, no, we need to wait for everyone before I tell my story because I told it so many, right? Who knows? And yes, we ask this question of Lazarus a lot, but Lazarus is not the only person that Jesus raised from the dead. And even the people that Jesus raised from the dead are not the only people in the Bible that are raised from the dead, right? You have Elijah raises someone from the dead, and then he dies, and then he raises someone else from the dead. That's Elisha. That's a weird story. And then you even have Paul, who bores someone to death with a sermon, and then you're right. And then who's it? Dorcas, who is raised by Peter. Is that right? Yeah. So, and that one's an interesting one too, right? Because, man, I can just see our LWML folk ladies, right? Because this story, Dorcas dies, and they go. Is it to Peter or is it Paul?
I think it's Paul.
Okay, one of the apostles that starts with a P. And how do they convince him to raise her from the dead? Do you guys know? They grab all the clothes she made her, shove it in his face, look at this coat, you gotta bring her back. And anyway, so I just think of our ladies making all the quilts. All of these people still have this lapse experience. Lazarus is the one that gets the most focus. And I could be wrong. Maybe Joe knows another example. I think Lazarus is the longest gap between death and resurrection that we have.
4 days?
Yes, he's 4 days, so he beats Jesus in that regard. The podcast missed the eye roll there. I don't think anyone else in the Bible had a longer, at least not explicitly stated.
Right. I've often thought that the people that Jesus or the people that had been raised just don't have any memory of it. Because how could you?
I know that's my.
So it's
that's my assumption.
It's easier to say. It's almost like when you're in a coma, like you get knocked out, you wake up. I don't remember.
Right.
I was doing this, and now here I am.
Yeah.
That's what I kind of think.
Something that you said, which was not about this at all, jogged my memory. Likely there are examples that are longer. It's a one-off line in Matthew of when, I think it's Matthew, now I'm doubting myself because Joe didn't immediately know what I was talking about. But when Jesus dies on Good Friday, a whole bunch of people walk out of their tombs.
Yeah.
And so chances, I don't know all the details, right? But chances are that is a...
You've just said all the details that are there.
Well, right, yeah, that's the whole thing. But just statistically, right? It's got to be some people that were there for more than 40.
Maybe going all over the place. Look, I'm missing.
Yeah, I know. Kind of a wild sorts of things. Anyway, so we have Lazarus today, and this is, I think, the longest account so far. It might not be quite as long as the man born blind. That one was sizable. But what we contextually were pretty close to that, right? So if you turn back just a little bit, chapter 9, right, is Jesus healing the man born blind. And in the same sense as that one, we have, there's some structural similarities and differences. So with the man born blind, this kind of second to last miracle, quote unquote, of Jesus, we have this statement, before Abraham was, ego eimi, right? I am. And then he moves into the healing of the blind man. Whereas with the death of Lazarus, right, if you kind of just look at your headings there, chapter 10 is the I am the good shepherd, which isn't that, I mean, yes, it's we go to this passage a lot for good reasons. It's extremely comforting, but it doesn't have the same impact as like before Abraham was, I am. I mean, Moses was a good shepherd, right? Might not be the good shepherd, but this is followed up with a doozy of a statement, I and the Father are one. It's like, okay, well, that changes the context of these other things. So both of these miracle events before them are predicated on really in-your-face divine statements that Jesus makes. Basically saying, I am God. Miracle, right? Now, a difference, but it's still not that different, between the man born blind and Lazarus is that these two miracles are similar in that they both give basically a lecture on what the meaning of this miracle is, right? Which we don't get in the walking on the water or the feeding of the 5,000 or really any of the other miracles, right? In the man born blind, we have this discourse that follows the miracle, which it kind of breaks down and expands on what just happened and what's the meaning of it. With the resurrection of Lazarus, it's front-loaded. So the conversation that interprets, if you will, the resurrection of Lazarus happens before the miracle. Again, these are just some structural differences between the two. So, before we dive in and start reading, are there any questions, either from last week, previous weeks, or feeding of the 5,000? That's where you are in the in the videos. And any of these before we dive into our text for today. All right. Well, let's see. I want to read it because I think it's worth reading. But 1 through 16, I don't have any notes on, in the sense of I don't have big important things to talk about. Although we could do not quite a class as long as this one, but we could do like a winter class just on the resurrection of Lazarus. Like there's a lot in here. But can I have a volunteer then? We'll do it paragraph by paragraph. So chapter 11, verses 1 through 4, please.
I'll do it.
Thank you, sir.
Now a certain man was ill, Lazarus of Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. It was Mary who anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was ill. So the sisters sent to him, saying, Lord, he whom you love is ill. But when Jesus heard it, he said, This illness does not lead to death. It is for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it. All
right, so a couple of notes here. First of all, we get the setup, right? A certain man was ill, Lazarus, who we're then given some context. Jesus knows who this person is, right? It's not just a man somewhere is ill. Jesus is running into plenty of them, right? This is someone who's close to Jesus. We're given a little bit of an aside. I'm sure there's a more technical way to say that, but I didn't write it down. So we're told that he is the brother of Mary and Martha. Now, Mary and Martha we know. John gives us some details about Mary. What is noteworthy, although we're not going to really dig into it, although there's some stuff there, is that when Mary is identified as the one who anoints Jesus' feet with the ointment, that hasn't happened yet in the story, right? Now, obviously, John knows because John is writing this after the fact. This isn't a diary. But John is pushing the narrative forward. If all you had was John, you would not know what he's talking about. Welcome. You wouldn't know necessarily that Mary is the one who anoints Jesus' feet with ointment. Like I said, that happens later in the book. Why do you think John makes this note to kind of connect this anointing here?
Maybe so that people know that Jesus was close to them. It wasn't the first time he's met with Mary or something.
Oh, he's certainly close with them, or at least he will be. But yes, there's that connection there. They're doing handbell stuff. I'm going to let you guys think about this while I make sure all of my other microphones are muted so that we don't hear the handbells for the whole time. So I think, and I'll be right back.
Okay.
I'm glad I did. One of them was unmuted. The 1 week I don't do it, right? All right, you had your time to process. So, what do you guys think? Why might John be including it? I mean, yeah, part of it is to establish that intimate connection.
We don't know which Mary it is.
Okay, I think that's also somewhat worthwhile here, right? Because there's a whole bunch of Marys, right? I think there's probably more because just the connection with Mary and Martha at least narrows it down. But I don't know. So I think that's there, but I think there's some more going on. Anything else? Well, remember, when the book of John is not necessarily linear, it's very structural, and the structure of how John puts things together is always really important. So, when in Jesus' ministry does Mary anoint his feet? It's right before what?
The crucifixion?
Right before the crucifixion, right? And so I think kind of two things are going on here. One is John is trying to connect in our minds the resurrection of Lazarus to the crucifixion account, right? Because let's say this isn't your first time through the book of John. You're about to hear of the resurrection of Lazarus, and John says, oh, by the way, don't forget about the crucifixion, right? So I think John wants us to interpret and understand what we're about to read through that event that is to come. Another one has to do with like worship and anointing and things like that in general. And there's a lot there, but I think it's kind of outside the scope of what we need to deal with here. But I think just with everything else, right, we've kind of been running this understanding of all of the miracles of John with an introduction that is the light coming into the world not knowing it, the darkness being overcome by it. That light is the Word, and the Word is God. The Word has now become man, right? So John 1 is kind of our introductory rallying point, if you will. And the other one, at least for many of these miracles, is the crucifixion, death, resurrection, and ascension of Jesus, right? And I think I've talked about this in this class. We break those up as all discrete events. I think it's worthwhile, often, not always, to identify them as one unit, right? The suffering, death, resurrection, certainly those together. but even the ascension as being part of that, kind of that culminative work of Christ, right? And so John's wanting us to think about that as we're reading the account of the death and resurrection of Lazarus. All right, and then going back to questions.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So why did Jesus say this illness does not?
Good, I was about to bring that up. Yeah, so verse 4 is a weird verse for people who know what's to come, right? So let's pretend for a moment that we're not, right? Because again, we want to, as often as possible, interpret and understand the Bible first through the lens of the people that were present. And then for the audience that received the book, so that's first century, second century Christians, right? And then to us, right? The church across all time. And so to the disciple, what are the disciples hearing when Jesus says this, right? So picture the scene, right? Jesus and the disciples are not at Bethany. Why aren't they at Bethany?
Because he waited.
Well, he does wait, but why aren't they there to begin with? This comes up later. It's not safe. They are looking to arrest Jesus. And so he has left so that they don't arrest him. Right? That's why he's not there at the beginning of this story. Now, we know that when he hears about it, he says, okay, let's wait. Right? And so the disciples aren't there because Jesus is a wanted man there, for lack of a better way of phrasing it. And then they hear Lazarus is ill. Chances are, most if not all the disciples also know Lazarus, right? Mm-hmm. So let's just make that assumption that either it's their friend or acquaintance, or certainly if someone's going to say the one you love is ill, Jesus has talked about this guy before, right? So they know that Jesus cares about Lazarus. At the very least, if not, they're also friends with them, right? Probably they are, because Mary and Martha seem to be intimately connected with the disciples later, right? And then, so he's ill, come quick, right? Like I said, there's reason to believe Mary and Martha know that Jesus is not safe in Bethany. So what might that imply about this illness? That they're willing to send someone to be like, Jesus, you need to come here now.
That it is.
This is a big deal, right? Like this is Jesus, we don't have any other options. Like this is life and death, right? Like you need to come, right? And we get that response with Martha, right? Lord, if you had been here, he would not have died. Granted, that's pushing forward, but we definitely get this sense of Mary and Martha and the messenger, everyone involved knows Lazarus is in bad shape. And Jesus, even though it's not safe, has to come. Otherwise, he's gone. Right? And then what does Jesus say? Don't worry about it. This won't lead to death. Now, well, okay. Let's not completely ignore the second half of what he says, right? It is for the glory of God, so that the Son of God might be glorified through it. I think we can understand that part. We've watched, 6 miracles already? We understand that when Jesus does miraculous things, he's glorifying himself. He's identifying and demonstrating that he is God in the world acting. And so I think we're okay with that. I mean, is anyone confused by that clause?
No, it's real similar because the blind guy who sinned, it's for the glory.
Right, yeah, we got that same sort of an answer, absolutely. But it's the thing Jesus says before that I'm with you. That doesn't fit.
Well, it sounds like a lot. Because
it does. It does lead to death, right?
Jesus knows he's going to die.
Exactly. And he knows when he dies, too, right? Like, I mean, even if we don't know that Jesus is God and knows everything, like later in the account, he'll say, he's dead, right? The disciples don't understand what Jesus is saying. I think for good reason, right? Again, they're not dumb, but Jesus, who they know to be God, says he's not going to die. Or, I shouldn't change his words here, right? This doesn't lead to death, right?
This illness is not leading to death.
I mean, This is not called the healing of Lazarus. The man was rotting in the grave for 4 days, right? It's mentioned more than once that he stinks by the time Jesus gets there, right? So how are we supposed to deal with what feels like a lie? How do we deal with this? What is Jesus saying? What's the point? Why does he say it this way? What do you guys think? So I will say, if you don't have a good answer, neither did the giant blue commentary. It just just brushed right on over that line, which I'm like, that's the only line in here I was interested in, because I'm with you. It really doesn't feel like that. What do you have for us, Jeff?
I see it as Jesus anticipating the resurrection.
Yeah, so I think there is an
hint to the disciples that there's something more at work here.
So I think there's definitely, you have to understand this with the resurrection of Lazarus in mind. Now, the closest I got to this commentary dealing with this is also how they avoided the problem altogether. My interlinear scholar over there, what does it say about the death? Is there an adjective attached to it in your text? Because I don't know what text he was using. So if you don't know, while he's looking that up, so I can fill the air.
There's something interesting in my Lutheran study
Okay.
Bible. 4 days, perhaps significant because of the rabbinic belief that the soul hovers over the body for 3 days and then departs when decomposition sets in.
Yeah,
so perhaps
that was
it
commented.
wasn't till death because his soul.
Well, but he's gone for 4 days. Yeah, and so that was in the commentary too. I wasn't a huge fan of that interpretation because the next thing I wanted to know
heard
is
that before. That's why I just saw it.
Right.
I
was like, well, why is this 4 days? We will talk about the 4 days because I have a interpretation of the 4 days that I like more than the rabbinic traditions because, I mean, I think that's worthwhile, and the connection with the soul hovers for 3 days and Jesus being 3 days. I mean, there's probably something there, but the one I got from St. Augustine, I like a little bit more, even though it might take a little stretching.
It's pretty straightforward.
Okay.
Having heard this, Jesus said, this sickness is not close unto death, but but for
okay. So he weaseled his way out of the translation. By the way, Joe can translate like that. He was reading the Greek to you. I cannot do that. The way the commenter translated this, and I don't know if he has variant backup or if he was avoiding the problem, is he translated it as eternal death. Again, the edition Joe has, which is the Nestle Aland, I assume, does not have that adjective in there. So it's possible that it's a variant reading. I don't know if you have the...
There's no variant.
Oh, well, and by the way, if it was a variant reading, right, we're doing high-level text critical stuff here, would we assume that that is original just based on the translation, right? Would we assume that the reading, this doesn't lead to death, or this doesn't lead to eternal death, is more likely to be original? What do you guys think? We talked very briefly about this a number of lessons ago.
The simplest.
I would say the eternal was added later.
Why? I mean, you're right, but why?
Somebody wanted to fill in.
It solves the problem that you picked up, or you're like, and this is exactly how this kind of thing happens. You are a faithful scribe, and you're reading this, and you go, Jesus just lied. And I know he's God, and he's sinless, so he can't lie. So the edition the copy that I'm making must be missing a word here. And you don't even put it in there. You put it in the margin, right? And then a guy 100 years later finds your copy. It's like, ooh, I got a good old one. And they read that same thing and go, Jesus is lying here. But this guy from 100 years old, right? And we're only in 250. He thought, probably not 250, anyway, he thought that there was a word missing there, and he has no context of why. And so he goes, that has to be the right one, and he pops it in. So apparently that doesn't exist in any reasonable one. So
No, the only variant is whether to glorify the Son or to glorify the Son of God.
okay, so
Um,
one of those variants that doesn't matter or doesn't change anything, right? So I mean, the only way I can take it is that when Jesus says this, he has in mind resurrection.
in defense of your commentator,
Yeah, well, I mean, he is smarter than you.
it's very traditional that when John uses the term life, he's talking about eternal life.
Mhm.
And by analogy, you may also see a lot of eternal death in whenever John uses references to death.
That would make sense.
That is a very Eighth Commandment way of taking it. I think he was weaseling out of the problem. Personally, right? But I mean, there's probably, even if he is weaseling, he probably had a good reason to weasel. These do have to go through reviews. So it's not like this is one dude writing some random thing, right? So yeah, I don't know. This is one of those kind of weird lines, I would say. It's also possible that we are post-Enlightenment people, and we go, well, it does lead to death. It's like, well, but it also doesn't. It leads to a very brief visit with death, but that's not what it leads to, right?
Maybe he could have been doing it so that the disciples wouldn't get on his back to go do something.
Yeah, maybe. Who knows?
If you're a believer, there is no death. Really?
Well, right. So in Jesus, we're going to see, for what it's worth, Jesus will be constantly pushing people towards things like the resurrection, right? Another sense that just popped into my brain when I was looking for a way to phrase that is this doesn't lead to spiritual death, but that's damnation, so that's probably not what's going on here either. It's just another way to weasel on out of it, right? But no, good note. It's a strange thing to say. We do know that ultimately that this leads to the glorification of God and the Son of God, right? And I think that is while the first chunk is strange, and it's worth taking a minute to be like, well, that's kind of a weird thing. Why did Jesus say it that way? That means you're paying attention to the text. This is good. This is what I want. The thrust of the whole quote, and keep in mind, Jesus said it as one sentence, right? Is this illness is about glorifying me, right? So good. Anything else before we continue on? All right. Well, the next paragraph takes us straight through to 16. So is anyone willing? 5 to 16? I'll read. Thanks, sir.
Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was ill, he stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. And after this, he said to his disciples, let's go to Judea. Again, the disciples said to him, Rabbi, the Jews were just now seeking to stone you, and you are going there again? Jesus answered, are there not 12 hours in the day? If anyone walks in the day, he does not stumble, because he sees the light of this world. If anyone walks in the night, he stumbles, because the light is not in him. After saying these things, he said to them, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I will go to awaken him. The disciples said to him, Lord, if he has fallen asleep, he will recover. Now Jesus had spoken of his death, but they thought that he meant taking rest in sleep. Then Jesus told them plainly, Lazarus has died. For your sake, I am glad I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him. So Thomas, called the twin, said to his fellow disciples, let us also go, that we may die with him.
All right. So again, another kind of interesting little vignette, if you will. So it starts off, and we read this during the Passion Week. In fact, this is one of the readings for Passion Sunday, I believe. No, anyway, it's read sometime, and now I don't recall. But I always love 5 and 6 because it seems so wrong, right? Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was ill, he stayed where he was for 2 more days. So hold on, John. You're setting us up for, right? How would you expect this to go, right? Now, Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard Lazarus was ill, he dropped everything and went full on Elijah after Mount Carmel and light speed sprinted over there, right? Like, that's what you would expect. But Jesus does the exact opposite. He might be a bit crude. He sits on his butt for 2 days and does nothing, right? And then when he's like, okay, now it's time to go, his disciples don't understand what he's talking about. Why not? Well, what has Jesus already told them? He's not going to die, right? So, I mean, at least that's this. Again, we are recognizing the resurrection in this sort of thing. But they don't know that yet. There haven't been any resurrections in the Gospel of John. So the first time here doesn't know that yet, right? And so, I mean, yeah, it's entirely reasonable that the disciples will go, well, don't wake him up, Jesus. Don't go bother him, right? Because when you're sick, you go to sleep and then you get better, right? You're resting. And then, of course, he says, no, he's dead. It's time for us to go. But he says another really strange thing, right? For your sake, I'm glad I was not there, so you may believe. But let us go to him. All right, so before you can ask me about this sentence, because this one feels in that same sort of vein, why does Jesus say this? So for whose sake is it that Jesus is glad that he wasn't there?
The apostles.
Right, so the apostles specifically. It's not for Lazarus' sake. It's not really even for Mary and Martha.
Well, they're going to see him raised. He knows he's going to raise Lazarus from the dead, and they're going to have to know he's God.
Well, right.
No question.
Yeah, so I mean, I think hitting that second half, right? So that you may believe, right? So I mean, clearly the goal is that Jesus is happy that he wasn't there when Lazarus died so that his disciples believe. To me, I pulled kind of 2 implications out of especially that first section, right? I'm glad that I wasn't there, right? So let's dig into this a little bit. Well, if Jesus is glad he wasn't there, that means he wouldn't have been glad to have been there. Why?
Well, because if he's there and he's standing there watching him die and doesn't do anything, that is pretty rough.
Because I think, right, this is another angel on the head of a pin. I think Jesus would have just let him die, right? I mean, he does. I think that Jesus is happy for his sake and for the disciples, right? I mean, could you imagine being the disciples waiting for 2 days in the home of Lazarus while he's sick, coughing, actively dying, and Jesus just sits there?
Well, Mary and Martha would have been all over this.
Yeah, they all would have been, right? And, I mean, I think it's not unreasonable. Some of the disciples may have been like, I'm out. Like, I can't do this with you, right? How can you do that? So I think that might be part of it. So Jesus was like, Lazarus is going to die. I need to raise him from the dead. So he has to die, whether I'm there or not. So I think that's part of it. I think there's another portion that I think includes us a little bit more. It's better for modern readers, especially, that Jesus wasn't there when Lazarus died. Why? See, the problem is you're all good, faithful believers. Bring out your inner atheist. Not too much, but think like an
What's the
atheist.
question again?
Why for us is it a good thing that Jesus was not there when Lazarus died?
Because you wanted him to be in the grave a period of time. So
Okay, so I mean that's part of it. It's connected. It's the same thing. So you go one more step. Why would Jesus want to, 1, not be there when Lazarus dies, and 2, let him rot for a little bit.
So it's obvious that he's being raised from the dead.
And it's obvious that what is not happening.
He's not just being awakened.
He's not pulling a trick. He's not. This isn't Penn and Teller raise Lazarus from the dead, right?
Yeah.
He's not there faking Lazarus's death and then raising him again. So I think this is kind of pushing forward to folks like us, right? Is, well, we kind of have more evidence here that no, and yes, I understand that you still need to take this at face value for that, right? So that inner atheist doesn't just disappear, but I think there's value in, there's no smoke and mirrors here. This is clear as day. What has happened and what Jesus is going to do is abundantly clear, right? He's going to take a dead man, a very dead man, and he's going to raise him from the dead, right? I mean, yeah, go ahead.
I have another thought. I know this is
No.
but I have another thought too. Also, not conflicting, but another element might have been that Jesus wasn't ready to be crucified. The time wasn't right because he hadn't fulfilled everything he wanted to do, and he may have known if he went back earlier that he may have
gotten
confronted. Yeah, he may have confronted.
Yeah, I mean, I think I do.
He may have known the coast was clear.
Yeah.
Go,
Right.
I mean, without
Yeah, kind of the coast clear.
conversations.
No, and I think that obviously you're right. We will never know, but I think there's value in us recognizing the imminent danger that Jesus is in going back to Bethany, because the disciples don't want him to go. They're like, no, we didn't go when he was sick. We're not going when he's dead, Jesus. What is wrong with you? Right? What does Thomas say when it's clear Jesus is going one way or the other? What does Thomas say?
Those die with you.
It's like, all right, well, we may as well die there, right? I mean, Thomas is very much under the impression that if they go back, they will die. So, I mean, I think because we read it in a story and because we read it in a lectionary and we break it up and it's so long ago, it kind of gets sanitized to us. And we can miss those details of, it's not safe for Jesus to go back. So I think maybe that has a hand in it here. Good. All right. Other questions on that section before we get into what I actually, my first note. 45 minutes in. That's all good. All right, so as Jesus arrives, we are going, one other quick thing about Thomas. There are two other significant moments for Thomas in the book of John. Neither of them have happened yet. They're both in the future. One is Thomas says to Jesus, right, when Jesus talks about his ascension, Thomas says, well, how do we know the way, right? And then Jesus says, I am the way, right? And so we have another time where Thomas is looking to follow Jesus. And of course we have, the famous one, why we don't call him Thomas the Twin, we call him Doubting Thomas, right? And we still see there at the conclusion of that event, Thomas gets back to this, I'm following you to death. And he does, right? He goes a lot further than Judea, but Thomas does follow Jesus till he dies. We know that almost certainly in India is where Thomas died. And so John's including some of those connections later. So as Jesus arrives in Bethany, he has two conversations, one with each of the sisters before he goes in. So let's start with and by the way, these conversations are what really provide us with the context and that lesson of what this whole miracle is about. So, volunteer for 17 through 27, please. Conversation with Martha.
Okay.
Thank you, Mark.
Now, when Jesus came, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb 4 days. Bethany was near Jerusalem, about 2 miles off, and many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to console them concerning their brother. So when Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went and met him, but Mary remained seated in the house. Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that whatever you ask from God, God will give you. Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. Martha said to him, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live. And everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this? She said to him, Yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who is coming into the world.
All right, just a quick note so I don't forget it later, right? In Martha's confession, she says, Yes, Lord. This is significant in and of itself. I believe that you are the Christ. What does the Christ mean? Do we remember?
The Messiah.
Not the Messiah. I mean, the Messiah means the same thing as Christ. Is that correct? Okay. Not the chosen one. That is not. I'm talking about like the translation of these words, not the colloquial sense. The anointed one, right? So I know that you are the anointed one. We've just gotten a reference to Jesus being anointed right before his death, right? His baptism for us is still in the background. So this confession that Martha has right at the end here is a tremendous confession of faith. Like I said, I just didn't want to forget about that Christ note there. That's what that means, right? In Greek, it says Christos. We just move the Greek word into English, right? So they would have understood if they heard this sentence, right? Yes, Lord, I believe that you are the anointed one, the Son of God, right? Just because that's what the word means, right? We just don't translate it because it's the title, and I don't think we need to, right? Okay, so Jesus comes into Bethany. Where is he when Martha comes to him?
Outside.
He's a little ways off, 2 miles out, right? I think is what it says. Oh no, Bethany is 2 miles out from Jerusalem. Yeah, so he's a ways out, and Martha comes to him. Martha does not wait. What is Martha doing before this? Well, what are Mary and Martha doing?
Just mourning.
Think of it as it's the wake. They're sitting and mourning for a period of time, right? And they're not alone, right? They're hosting people in the midst of this. And what do we know about Martha?
She likes to serve.
She's the host. She's the servant, right? So it's not unreasonable that Martha gets word of Jesus coming first, right? That she hears about it as guests are coming in and out. Presumably, someone goes up to her and tells her, "Hey, Jesus is coming." Right? You got another guest.
She was the older sister,
yes.
wasn't she? Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
and it also seems to be a personality thing too. And so, what is so we're making a few assumptions. One is that this isn't a big pronouncement that Jesus, right? They don't come in with trumpets blaring. Hey, Jesus is on his way. Someone goes up to Martha and tells her, "Hey, Jesus is coming." What is her reaction? Yeah. So what does she stop doing?
Mourning.
I wouldn't say she stops mourning. She stops official ceremonial mourning, right? She abandons everyone at the house, right? I think it's worth noting this is a pretty stark departure from when we first hear from Mary and Martha, right? What is Martha doing the first time, right, when Jesus is there? She's playing the hostess. She's doing a good job, and she gets mad at Martha. Or she gets mad at Mary, rather. And what's Jesus' answer to her?
Martha, Martha.
It's Martha, Martha. What he says next is important. So what does he say next?
You're troubled about many things.
You're troubled about many things.
There's one good thing, and Mary has chosen.
He's got it. Yeah. Mary has chosen the better portion, right? What is the better portion?
Jesus.
Sitting at Jesus' feet, right? I think Martha has learned that lesson and learned it well, right? She's doing the same thing she was. She's busying herself as the hostess. she hears, hey, Jesus is coming. She says, I'm going to go choose the better thing. We're reading between the lines, but that's what she does. She doesn't wait for Jesus to show up, which is what you kind of would have expected her to do. She drops everything and goes to Jesus. Then she does what an older sister friend, right? We all know ladies like this. She kind of chastises Jesus, right? Hey, if you were here, I wouldn't have to be worrying about all of this, right? Now, every commentary I looked at identifies that Martha is not terribly pleased with Jesus. But they also all agree that she is not like mad at him. This is still a statement of faith, right? It's Jesus, if you would have been here, like I wanted you to be, Lazarus wouldn't have died. But there's a little bit of reproof in there, but it's not like she's yelling and screaming at Jesus and
she's addressing them.
Right. There's still an enormous amount of respect
for
who Jesus is. It's more of a mourning sort of reproof. It's like, you would have been here, this wouldn't have happened. And so but I think that there's definitely, some of her personality coming out in there. You got something, Joe?
I just thought it odd, and I'm anticipating, when she comes back and tells Mary, and Mary leaves, a group goes with her, assuming she's going to the tomb.
Right.
Where Martha got out of the room without...
And they don't, Yeah, so there is a question, and I've already kind of assumed the answer, is why doesn't Mary go to meet Jesus too?
I don't think she knew. I think somebody told Martha and she slipped out the back kitchen door.
This is 7 pages worth of the commentary with bullet points and sub-bullet points for this guy giving all of the possibilities. I gave you the one I think is most likely. I think she was sitting quietly mourning, maybe with the group, and someone told the hostess, and Martha didn't mention it to Mary. She went straight to Jesus. I think it's not as if Mary is ignoring Jesus, mostly because of the reaction later when she's actively told. I think she's unaware that Jesus is there. And I think that's why she doesn't leave. So we don't need to...
Could she have been praying?
Oh, I'm sure she would have been in prayer. Yeah.
Jewish religion.
Yeah. Oh, I'm confident there would have been prayers involved, right? Okay, so then Martha said, right, if you had been here, he wouldn't have died. Even now, I know that whatever you ask from God, God will give you. Right? So what does Mary mean by that?
I did not hear the question.
When Mary says, or not Mary, Martha, even now I know that whatever you ask from God, God will give you. What is she asking Jesus? Or what is she implying here?
She wants him to bring...
that's the question. Is that what she's asking for?
If she chooses to raise Lazarus,
that's
she
what I
can.
So the one thing everyone can agree on is that this is still a statement of faith, right? What none of the commenters can agree on is what is Martha asking Jesus to do here? Most of them land, I don't know why specifically, probably because of the answer that end the conversation. Most of them land on some sense of Martha is looking forward to the general resurrection, not asking for temporal. Not everyone agrees with that. Some people say no, that she's looking for this sort of healing in faith. Either way, she's kind of looking to Jesus to solve this problem, however it may be, right? Of course, right, Jesus' answer, this is where I think most of the commentators are getting this from. Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. Now, what's Jesus talking about?
Ultimately.
Well, this is also a little ambiguous, right? He's possibly, there's no grammatical help here, right? Yeah. So, I think that you definitely, a few minutes later, Jesus raises Lazarus from the dead. He is aware that this is what's going to happen, right? But I do also think that Jesus is, right, I think this is one of those when Jesus is ambiguous, it's a both and. I think Jesus is also pointing towards the general resurrection. Now, what might be a hint at that? Well, when Martha says, I know that he will rise again, the resurrection on the last day. That's what she's assuming he's talking about. Jesus says, I am the resurrection of the life, right? And then whoever believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live, right? And everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this? And she says, yes, right? So when Jesus says this, we can, in some ways, we land back at the earlier question. The people, we're about to start some renovations on our memorial garden. We have a memorial garden because people who believed in Jesus have died. So when Jesus says, whoever believes in me shall never die, what is he talking about there?
He's talking about
Eternal life.
Nobody dies eternally.
Here's the okay, I think you might be getting onto something there. But here's the trick, is he says, even though he die, yet shall he live. So we know he's already talking about the resurrection. And he says, those who believe in me will never die. So how do we...
Talking about the Spirit, for sure.
I think we're dealing here with spiritual death that Jesus is talking about. Now, I think if we want to make sure that we're very Lutheran about this, right? We recognize that you are born in spiritual death, right? You're not born spiritually alive, right? So you start out dead, right? And then when you are born again, to use the Nicodemus phrase from earlier in the book, right? Then you are spiritually alive. And those who are spiritually alive never die. Because, certainly in the spiritual sense, but even then, we look to Paul, right? Where Paul says, no, death is just sleep, right? Now, it's different, right? There's still mourning and all that involved, but the Christian confession is something that recognizes that the death of believers is fundamentally different than the death of unbelievers. Physiologically, they're exactly the same. Everyone's going to rise again bodily on the last day, but there is a qualitative difference for those who die in faith and those who do not die in faith. And I think that's what Jesus is driving at here. Does that... All right. Cool. None of you disagree with me, so I don't have to sort that out anymore. Right? Ends with this statement of faith there, right? Good. Let's keep pushing forward or we're going to leave Lazarus in the tomb for lack of time. Verses 28 through 37, please.
When she had said this, she went and called her sister Mary, saying in private, "The teacher is here and is calling for you." And when she heard it, she arose quickly and went to him. Now, Jesus had not yet come into the village, but was still in the place where Martha had met him. When the Jews who were with her in the house, consoling her, saw Mary rising quickly and going out, they followed her, supposing that she was going to the tomb to weep there. Now, when Mary came to where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet, saying to him, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in his spirit and greatly troubled. And he said, "Where have they laid him?" They said to him, "Lord, come and see." Jesus wept. So the Jews said, "See how he loved him?" But some of them said, "Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man also have kept this man from dying?"
All right. So we move into the next event. Clearly, there's some skipped dialogue here, right? Because Jesus never actually requests Mary's presence in the text, but Martha says he does. So clearly, there's some conversation that happens off script, if you will. Note what's worth noting, right? Martha doesn't need Jesus to call for her. Mary does, right? And again, we're not going to blame her for that, but Jesus does have to call Mary. And this is the same Mary in the garden later, right? Okay, where
No,
Jesus...
I'm sorry.
Is that a different
Mary
one?
Magdalene.
Okay, I can never keep... There's too many Marys, right? So Martha goes, and here's where we get our hint that they know that this is not a safe situation for Jesus, right? Did you catch it? Right? So when she had said this, she went and called her sister Mary, saying in private, the teacher is here and is calling for you, right? And no one else there knows that Jesus is around until they see him, right? Because they don't say, oh, well, Mary's going out to go meet with Jesus. They say, she must be going to the tomb, so let's go there. So this is where we get this hint that, and there are multiple possible reasons. Again, 3, I think it's worth noting them. One is that Martha wants to give Mary a private moment with Jesus, kind of like she had a private moment. The second is to avoid embarrassing her, right? Coming and shouting, hey, Mary, Jesus wants you, right? And I think that the most likely reason this is a private conversation is, and it could be more than one, right, is to keep Jesus' presence from being discovered. Because I see your hand. We do know that what happens after this. What do some of the guests and visitors do? When they see Jesus, they can report it to the Pharisees. So there are people there who go rat Jesus out. And maybe it was bystanders, maybe it was like second or third down the line. I mean, I'm sure people talked about this, right? But word gets to the Pharisees fairly quickly.
Well, this time I think everybody knew who he was because they said,
well,
he
right.
opened the eyes of the blind.
Well, yeah, so the people there definitely recognize him, right?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So, yeah, and I think it's significant that, so Martha went out to him and back, yet he's still not there, that he was staying.
Well, yeah, so why isn't he?
Why didn't he just walk in?
Right.
Hey.
Yeah, he stays out on the outskirts.
Yeah, he doesn't just go bolting in.
Right, and I don't have a great handle on this. Maybe you have some insight. Just doing some read-throughs, I get the impression that Jesus is kind of at the tomb of Lazarus. I don't think that there's well, I guess it does say he came to the tomb.
He asked, where have you laid him? So.
Yeah, okay, well, never mind. So that's wherever Jesus is, right? Mary has the same response as Martha, right? If he had been here, he wouldn't have died. Jesus' answer to her is different. Another thing, right? Mary falls at Jesus' feet, just like she does when she anoints him with the ointment. So, and it's a worshipful position, right? It's in treating him and all that, but in the context, we can kind of see that there's faith in that sense. Jesus' reaction to Mary, who asked the same question, is different, right? So Jesus doesn't give Mary, there's no discourse concerning resurrection, right? People have made all sorts of assumptions as to why Jesus doesn't react to Mary the same way, ranging from, well, Mary already knew, to, Martha was more cerebral, right? It's a lot of just making assumptions about people that we don't have any sense of. But I think rather than ask the question, why does Jesus react different? The question is, how does Jesus react? And what can we learn from that reaction? Because again, the conversation with Martha and the conversation with Mary are meant to give us instruction as to what this miracle that's about to happen means. What is the point of it, right? And so the conversation with Martha, it's very clear, right? This is about resurrection. Jesus is the resurrection and the life. With Mary, though, it's different. It's a much more emotive response. How does Jesus respond to Mary weeping at his feet, saying, Lord, if you had been here, he wouldn't have died?
He cried too.
He was overcome with grief, just like her.
So he does weep, but that's not the first emotion that is described here.
Well, he says, "Where have you laid him?" I mean, it was very
Okay, so
like almost like let's get on with it or something.
yeah, right. So this is verse 33. When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in his spirit and greatly troubled. So that's the first emotional response. Then he says, where have you laid him? They said to him, Lord, come and see. Then he weeps, right? And then, we didn't read it, but in verse 38, then Jesus, deeply moved, came to the tomb. So we have that same emotional phrase is, there's a technical term for it, bookending Jesus and weeping. So a lot has been written on, especially what would I say, verse 33, is what does that mean? And again, we got numbers and footnotes and da-da-da-da-da-da. When it says Jesus is moved, there are 3 different ways to translate this and interpret it in translation, at least so far as the commentary I read said. The first is, I think, the one we hit on the most, is his emotion. He's deeply moved by just an overflow of emotions, right? What most of us would probably say, if we said, oh, I'm deeply moved, that's probably what we would mean, is that we're just overcome with emotion. The second changes the way the dative is understood, and I don't remember the phrase or the term, but makes it so that it's rendered more like the Holy Spirit deeply moved Jesus. Well, I say the Holy Spirit is the Jesus Spirit, which is the Holy Spirit in John's context here. That's a Christology thing for another day. That the Holy Spirit is stirring Jesus up. And so we almost have the Spirit like spurring Jesus to action here. So that's another possible way to take this. And the other one, mine has a footnote there. I don't know if yours does, right? Or, instead of deeply moved, was indignant, was angry. This translation, which is a valid translation, has a lot of comments about it. That seems to be, just from what I looked at, that seems to be the preferred translation of the early church. That Jesus is angry when he sees Mary and the crowds weeping, which led them to have to really deal with, hold on, why is Jesus angry? So, what are some of our options for Jesus being angry?
Still, he was grief-stricken and mourning.
So,
Lazarus, 'cause up until
so that's still going back to the deeply moved,
yeah.
right? So I'm gonna push back on that one, saying no. So read it this way, right? When Jesus saw her weeping and the Jews who had come with her weeping, he was angry in his spirit and greatly troubled.
Well, the study Bible also says it might mean irritated.
Yeah, angry, irritated.
Irritated to me is exactly what these guys are saying. I mean, he did the blind man. Why didn't he do Lazarus?
Okay, so I mean, we get kind of that sort of thing.
Jesus has said, "You're about to get it. Why didn't everybody else get this?"
Yeah. Okay.
What have I been doing?
All right, maybe. So one option that is not favored by many people is that Jesus is mad at Mary and the Jews for not having faith that he's about to raise him from the dead.
Yes.
That face is the one I made when I read these guys suggesting this. That really doesn't seem to fit anything else here. Because these people they're coming to him in faith. They recognize at least that Jesus could have healed him later. And like this is all purposeful. So yes, it is grammatically accurate to read this as Jesus saw them weeping and he got mad at them about it. That doesn't seem to fit contextually. The way I take it, and this is the way I take this whole section, is with Martha, Jesus is recognizing, I am the resurrection and life, right? That's what he was teaching. I think with Mary here and this deep emotional response, bordering on, if not angry, is that Jesus is angry at death. Remember, he's the Lord of creation. Mm-hmm. He's the one who brought life into the world. He is life, right? That's what he just said. And he is seeing not only the face of death in Lazarus, but he's seeing the effect of death and the effect that it has on people that he dearly loves, which is everyone, by the way. And he gets upset. And so this is where we're coming back to basically what you said, but I wanted to push you in the direction.
No, I
right?
understand.
He's overcome with grief and anger and irritation, and you almost get the sense of Jesus kind of saying, why can't I have taken care of this already, right? I'm so ready to destroy death, right? And we're pushing towards the cross where he fights the final battle with death, right? I think that's the best way to take really this whole section of Jesus weeping and being deeply moved. By the way, this isn't the only time that Jesus sees people grieving and is deeply moved. And it's less ambiguous. I think it's in Luke where Jesus sees a funeral procession of just a kid, right? It's just a boy. And the word there, which I know because one guy preaches this sermon very regularly. It's a good sermon. The word there is splognitzomai, his guts twisted around inside of him. That is like deep emotional turmoil. That's not angry. So I think we can use that to help us understand this as Jesus, if we're going to say Jesus is angry, he's angry at death. He's angry at the curse on creation, that sort of thing.
Well, one of the things I see here too is I think he's showing his humanity.
Oh, I mean, yeah.
As a human, also,
right?
How could you be around all these mourning people and you care about these people in the human sense?
Right. He probably knows most, if not all, in a human way. He probably knows most, if not all, of them by name. Yeah. Right. Probably grew up with a few of them, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Right.
And I see that emotion.
Yeah. I mean, I think we definitely see his humanity at play here as well. Absolutely. Joe, did you have something to add?
The word is interestingly chosen.
Mm-hmm.
It has a physical connotation to it that is groaned. It groaned in his spirit. That carries both grief and frustration and irritation. It's
yeah. I think this is kind of he is being overcome with emotion. I think we're also totally valid to say that the Spirit is moving him. And I mean, the Spirit could be the source and the cause of that twisting around of emotions and that sort of thing. So I think it's both there. I do think it's wrong to say that it's not a damnable inaccuracy, but I do think it's a wrong interpretation to say that he's mad at the mourners. That doesn't seem to be. It just doesn't seem to fit the context there. Right, and then of course we have that reference to the previous miracle. Couldn't he who opened the eyes of the blind man, couldn't he have healed Lazarus? And what's the answer to that?
Yes.
Yes, and Jesus is going to go, you have no idea how much the answer to that is yes. Just you wait. You thought that was cool, right? Or you thought that was impressive. We're going to go. All right, I'll do the last section here. Then Jesus, deeply moved again, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone lay against it. Jesus said, take away the stone. Martha, the sister of the dead man, said to him, Lord, by this time there will be an odor, for he has been dead 4 days. Jesus said to her, did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God? So they took away the stone. And Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this on account of the people standing around, that they may believe that you sent me." When he had said these things, he cried out with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." The man who had died came out, his hands and feet bound with linen strips and his face wrapped with a cloth. Jesus said to them, "Unbind him and let him go." So here we have the actual miracle account. All right. I'm going to hold off. We'll kind of finish up with the 4-day thing that I got for you. So Jesus moves to the tomb, and he has 3 commands and a prayer, right? So the first is to take the stone away. Martha says, no, don't do that, right? Because it's going to stink, right? He is rotting, right? His spirit is gone no matter what. He's in the active stages of decay. You don't open the tomb right now. You come back a year later, you put all the bones in a box, you put the box in a cubby. I mean, that you can go and see these tombs. That's how they did it. You would put it kind of like this arrangement of tables with a slab in the middle, and you'd put the deceased on the slab. You'd wrap them up, and you'd put any ointments and herbs on them, and then you'd leave them there, and a year later, you would come back, and they would just be bones, and so you would take those bones, put them in a box, and put the box in a cubby along the walls. And then you put the next dead person in the family or wherever it is on the slab. Which is why whoever it is, I think it's John, makes a point that Jesus is in a fresh tomb. He's the first dead body in that tomb. And again, this is among other things. This is no smoke and mirrors here, people. This is the first dead guy in here, all that kind of stuff. Fresh tomb. So, right, Martha says no. Jesus refers back to the conversation that he just had. He said, I told you were about to see something. And she backs off. He then prays. Notice that he prays Father. Yes, we pray to the Father, but when Jesus is doing this, it is a prayer, but it is a performative act, right, for the people. When he says Father in this sense, this is a divine identification. And the desire of this prayer is that the people would direct their faith not to the Father, but to him. Why? Because he and the Father are one, right? He just came off the heels of that. This is identifying his divine role. He's not a messenger. He is the Son of the Father, right? So this is an I'm God statement, right? He then cries out, Lazarus, come out. There's a beautiful parallel here, right? It's the loud voice of Jesus that rouses humans from their graves. Just like in the day of resurrection, when the voice of Jesus calls to all of us, and we will all, just like Lazarus, come out of our graves, right? The connection, I'm going quickly for time, right? We get this connection that as a disciple of Jesus, Lazarus shares in the resurrection of Jesus, even though it hasn't happened yet. But Lazarus is connected to Jesus as a believer, just like we are too. So we get the same sort of thing. Finally, there's the third command, untie him and let him go. For what it's worth, there's an interesting little thing that the early church gets really stuck on, and they think it's a miracle within the miracle. Did you guys catch the second miracle that happened here? Probably not, because I didn't catch it, and I thought it was kind of funny. How could Lazarus walk? His hands and his feet are tied up. And so that Cyril and all these guys are like, this is another miracle that he, even though he was tied up, was able to walk out. It was a loose wrapping. It's probably not a second miracle, but they really get stuck on that apparently. And right, we see that in this unbind him, let him go, we have echoes of this truth that Lazarus is a new creation in his resurrection, right? The Creator calls the dead out of his grave and makes him new, right? Now, obviously, Lazarus isn't in a resurrection body like Jesus gets. That's still to come for him, like we talked about right at the beginning. But we're seeing those pictures of the resurrection. So Jesus uses this little resurrection to teach and to show the resurrection, which is him. He is the resurrection and the life, right? Of all. Questions there, then we'll hit 4 days, and then I got a little handout for you. All right. The best one I got for why is it important that Lazarus was in the tomb for 4 days is a spiritual interpretation, and it comes from Augustine. Although I don't think it's original to him, and I also don't think it's him alone. But it's a very long quote, so I'm summarizing it here. Augustine looks to the 4 days of death as representative of the 4 days of death of humanity. And so he says the first day of death is death in Adam, which happens when for us? In our birth, right? And that is our first day in the tomb. He then looks forward and says that the second day of death is our death and our transgression against natural law, right? That law written on the heart. Where Augustine says that's day 2, or the second death that we die. Day 3, he identifies as our death and our transgressions against the revealed law. So this is Moses, that kind of stuff. And then, anyone want to wander or venture a guess as to day 4? Because when I was going through this, I'm like, Augustine, you're out of deaths. I don't know what else you got here.
Baptism.
No, because this is a bad death. These deaths are bad.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. The 4th death is the death and the rejection of the gospel. So Christ come into the world bringing salvation, and he says, now we truly stink. Basically, right? Once you have died those 4 deaths, you're done, right? Of course, Jesus then brings Lazarus out. So that's why Augustine thinks it was so significant to mention it twice, that Lazarus was in the tomb for 4 days. I got a handout here. We're not going to read through it because it's too long. I printed exactly the right number. Look at that. It's a good thing Bill's in Texas, otherwise I'd be in trouble. The first is just a quote, and I say this because I have found it I've kind of looked into Orthodox liturgy a little bit for totally unrelated reasons. And one of the things that the Orthodox liturgy has that I want to put into our Easter liturgy is, I know, right? Is this, it's a song, it's a hymn, it's, the way it goes is, Christ is risen from the dead, trampling down death by death, and upon those in the tombs bestowing life. And it's a really old confession, but I think it's super cool, so we're probably doing this Easter. This is Rejoice, O Bethany. It's another really old setting for a Byzantine liturgy based on the resurrection of Lazarus. I will say the one that I'm familiar with has another verse that this one doesn't, which is actually the main reason why I wanted to bring it up. But you see in the first one there, it says something along the lines of, Rejoice, O Bethany, God came to you, and in him all who are dead are made alive, as is right, for he is the life. Right? Which is what he says, that confession to Mary. I am the resurrection and the life. And then the other stanza that's not in the one that I printed, it would be right near the end before the Gloria verses. And it goes something along the lines of, now we who are dead in sin have life in him, for he is the life. It's phrased slightly differently. But kind of that connection of, well, what else, how can we apply this to our life? Is just like Lazarus, or Jesus brought life to Lazarus who was dead, because he is the resurrection and the life, he brings that same life to you who, though you're breathing, are dead in sin. And he still brings you that same resurrection and life. So it's meant to be chanted. That's why it repeats itself. It's poetic. It's part of the liturgy. You can find versions of it being chanted online. It does not sound like our chanting. If you look at the Byzantine versions, at least, it sounds a lot more like something you'd hear in a mosque, just because that's the style of Byzantium, or Turkey, right? Which is where this comes from. Really cool stuff. But yeah, anyway, so have that for you guys to take home. Last minute questions about the last of Jesus' kind of official, quote unquote, miracles in the book of John. Although we will have at least one more class, because I want to kind of deal with, the big stuff at the end, the resurrection, that kind of thing, his death, all of that. So I don't know exactly how I'm going to do that next time, but we're going to meet at least one more time. But before that, any questions? All right, let's pray, and then I'm going to turn off the recording, and then I do have a question for you guys who are here. It just doesn't need to get into the recording, all that kind of stuff. So let's pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory,